Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, predicting the starting depth chart for the Oregon Ducks week one of the college football season. And this is a very exciting conversation to have because you look at this Oregon roster. And I mean, I've been pretty vocal. I think this is a national championship caliber roster where you see a ton of position battles at a lot of different spots. I want to give you guys some of my predictions in terms of who wins the starting jobs for this Oregon Ducks program. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the Oregon Duck fans. It is no secret that I am extremely high on this Oregon Ducks program heading into 2024, but more importantly, it has been a blast to talk about with you guys. The amount of support the Oregon Duck fans have shown the boys really does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys, whether you agree, whether you disagree with some of my picks for this Oregon Ducks starting depth chart. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. One, I always learn a ton from you guys, but more importantly, this is why I do it, to talk football with you guys in the comment section. So let me know how you guys are feeling. And without further ado, let's get into this one now. It's worth noting that this depth chart in front of us does not include the true freshmen and transfers coming in. So we got to fill that in ourselves. Now let's start with the quarterback position. Now, my brother's not on for this one. He's banging the table for Dante Moore. You guys know I'm rocking with Dylan Gabriel. Oregon brought him in to be the starting quarterback for this team in 2024. Dante Moore, I think, has an extremely bright future. That one of the best backups, if not the best backup in the country. But this is Dylan Gabriel's offense heading into 2024. More importantly, I think it is a perfect fit. You look at what Dylan Gabriel does well, getting the ball out quick, on time. That's exactly what Will Stein wants to do in this offense. And more importantly, he's going to be surrounded by elite talent on the outside. And that's where I think this conversation gets really exciting, is trying to project the three wide receivers for this Ducks team in 2024. I think you got two no-brainers, and I think you might be looking at one of, if not the best wide receiver duo that we see in the country, with Evan Stewart coming in from Texas A&M and Tez Johnson. Evan Stewart, everybody knows what he is because he was phenomenal as a true freshman. I feel like people are almost sleeping on him a little bit because there was a little dip in the production his second year at Texas A&M. But Tez Johnson, I mean, everyone wanted to talk about Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. I get it. Two guys that were absolute studs for the Oregon Ducks. Tez Johnson's numbers last year, absolutely incredible. When you dive into the film, how they used Tez Johnson was so exciting. This was a guy that caught for over 1,100 yards, 750 of those yards coming after the catch. He's elite after the catch, making people miss, an 81% completion percentage when targeted. This is a guy that just creates separation, catches everything that comes his way. I don't think it's crazy to say Tez Johnson is going to be the leading receiver for this Oregon Ducks team, especially with what Dylan Gabriel wants to do working with those slot wide receivers. Now, the conversation is, who is the number 3 wide receiver on this team? You got Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. I'm going to go Trayshawn Holden, a guy that you kind of wanted to see more of for the Oregon Ducks in 2023. It was just very hard to get on the field with how loaded that wide receiver room was. Trayshawn Holden, I think, is going to be an elite wide receiver 3. Now, I know that there are a lot of Duck fans who are very excited about the redshirt freshman, Jurion Dickey, who kind of got sidelined with some injuries during that freshman campaign, but physically extremely gifted. What a problem to have for the Oregon Ducks. I mean, me leaving out Jurion Dickey and leaving him out of the starting lineup is kind of wild to talk about, but that's just how loaded this wide receiver room is. But Jurion Dickey, a guy that if he does earn a starting spot for this Oregon Ducks team, you know he's going to be good because he's beaten out a lot of good wide receivers. But Jurion Dickey, I think, is going to get his work. I just don't know if he's going to be a starting guy for this Ducks team in 2024. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section on that one. Next position group I want to talk about, this running back room that, again, extremely deep. And another guy that I feel like just goes under the radar because Bucky Irvin was so good for the Ducks in 2023 is a guy in Jordan James who averaged 7.1 yards per carry. The kicker for me, 4 yards after contact. There are some running backs who average 4 yards per carry. Jordan James was averaging that after contact per carry. I love Jordan James. I'm excited to see what he can do with a little bit more of a workload, and a guy that I don't think is just a big-bodied, short yardage back. I think he can make it happen at the second level. You have a guy, Noah Whittington, coming back, who I am extremely excited about. You saw some really good things early on in 2023 before going down with an injury. Loaded running back room. Jordan James, I think the RB1 heading into the season. Now, the offensive line, again, why am I so high on the Oregon Ducks? Yes, an elite quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, elite wide receivers, but more importantly, I think this offensive line was one of the best units in the country last year, but I think it can be one of the best in the country this year as well. And you start evaluating the tackles, right? Josh Conley Jr., a Johnny Cornelius, two guys that in 12 months from now are going to be talked about, in my mind, as potential first-round NFL draft picks. So you are really feeling good about what you have at the tackle spot. Now, going to the inside, you lose Powers Johnson. I mean, Poncho at center is going to be an absolute stalwart. I've seen enough from him as a true freshman that I am extremely confident in his play. The kicker I want to throw into, right? We got Marcus Harper at that left guard spot. The right guard spot, and I went back and watched some film because I wasn't too familiar with Matthew Bedford. So I went back and watched Matthew Bedford, who's coming in from Indiana. I watched him against Michigan. Michigan arguably having the best interior defensive line in the country in 2023. Matthew Bedford was phenomenal. I don't think Matthew Bedford is just kind of a stopgap guard. I think he could truly be a very good guard for the Oregon Ducks. So you talk about two NFL caliber tackles, a lot of experience on the inside. This is an Oregon offensive line that I think could be one of the best in the country. Again, I think it was one of the best units last year. I think it certainly can be one of the best units this year at the tight end spot. Terrence Ferguson, tight end 1. But, I mean, I'm going to throw out Kenny Sadiq. I'm cheating a lot here, offering a couple names. But Terrence Ferguson, your tight end 1, Kenny Sadiq, going to be a guy that the Oregon Ducks rely on. Now, going to the defense, and this is where I think the conversation gets really interesting in terms of projecting. You got so much talent, a lot of young talent on the defensive line. How is it going to shake out? And my prediction here, you got Jordan Burch as that kind of heavy-handed defensive end, a guy that you can move all around the line of scrimmage. And then on the other side, you have a lot of names that you're excited about. I'm going to go with what I think is a fan favorite. Many of you guys shouting him out in the comment section. And I'm going to go with Blake Purchase. And that's not a shot at a guy like Mateo Yu, who is going to play a lot for the Oregon Ducks. But you talk about flashes from a true freshman, especially in the pass rush, in terms of the length, in terms of the athleticism. Blake Purchase, I think, is a guy that truly does emerge as a second-year guy that he still needed to develop that body. Mateo Yu already had that college football body. Blake Purchase, not so much. So I think you see a breakout for Blake Purchase. I'm going to have him starting on the other side, and I think the big question is this interior defensive line, right? You have a guy in Jamari Caldwell coming from Houston who was very good, and I think that was arguably one of the most important gets for the Oregon Ducks on that defensive line. And then I'm going to go with Amari Washington. And I think the real conversation for the Oregon Ducks is not necessarily who's starting, right? Jamari Caldwell, Amari Washington. What does that depth look like when you're rotating those big bodies? And can Jericho Johnson come in and be an impact? Can Aiden Breland come in and be an impact guy for the Oregon Ducks as true freshman? That's, in my mind, the biggest question. But if I'm projecting two starters, it is Amari Washington. It is Jamari Caldwell. Really excited to see and hear what spring practice holds for guys like Aiden Breland who are coming in as early enrollees. You go back to the linebacker room. Jeff Bossa. I mean, Jeff Bossa was third in the team with 17 pressures. He was number 1 in the team in run stops, over 20 run stops, also 17 pressures. They love to use Jeff Bossa in a lot of different ways, blitzing him off the edge, blitzing him in the A and B gap. I think Jeffrey Bossa coming back is massive. And then a guy in Justin Jacobs who I think needed to get his feet under him kind of halfway through that Oregon Ducks season. He's a guy that is an NFL caliber linebacker. He just needs to put it together. And my brother said it, and I think he said it best. Can Dan Lanning get that Georgia kind of mentality for those linebackers? You think about that Georgia team in 2021 when Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator, where they had 3 NFL linebackers that were flying all over the field. I think Jeff Bossa and Justin Jacobs have that kind of capability. I'm looking for them to kind of put that on the field in 2024 because those guys are NFL caliber guys. Now, you look towards the back end, and this was impossible. I spent like 20, 30 minutes kind of going over and kind of trying to project what this secondary room is going to look like. In my mind, probably one of the most loaded cornerback rooms that you see in the country. my predictions for who are your starting cornerbacks for the Oregon Ducks in 2024. One, I think, is a no-brainer in Jabbar Muhammad. We all know how good Jabbar Muhammad was. Oregon fans, national, college football fans in general, truly was one of the best cornerbacks in the country. I'm going to go a little different route than I think a lot of Oregon Duck fans are going to go. I think you'll hear Jaleel Florence's name. We got to include this nickel in this conversation, by the way. I think a lot of Oregon Duck fans are going to lean Jaleel Florence. And I think he's a really, really good player that starts in almost every single Power 5 program across the country. I'm going to go with Dante Manning. I thought Dante Manning played some really good football at times in 2023. I think he finally kind of showed why he was a 5-star coming out of high school. I got Jabbar Muhammad and Dante Manning as your starting boundary cornerbacks with guys like Jaleel Florence, Cam Alexander, Roderick Pleasant kind of playing a role as well. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who starts because you know your starting cornerbacks for the Oregon Ducks are going to be damn good because they got 6 guys that are Power 5 level, not only Power 5 guys, but all conference caliber cornerbacks. Now, this is where I think the conversation gets a little interesting is, all right, you got a bunch of pieces to the puzzle in terms of safeties and nickelbacks. How's it going to shake out? Right at nickel, I think Nico Reed is going to be your starter with Brandon Johnson coming from Duke as another guy that can play a role. Now, Tasheem Johnson was that starting nickel for the Oregon Ducks last year, but the way I look at this Oregon secondary, it is you got to get the best 5 on the field. Right. And we have some question marks at the safety spot. Tasheem Johnson, a guy that certainly can play safety. You got 2 really good nickels and Nico Reed and Brandon Johnson. Have them compete out for that nickel spot and then take Tasheem Johnson and bring him back into the secondary where you have Tasheem Johnson and Kobe Savage playing in the back end. Now, Kobe Savage, extremely exciting. I think he is kind of Evan Williams 2.0 in all the different ways the Oregon Ducks used Evan Williams. I think that's how Kobe Savage was used for Kansas State. And then Tasheem Johnson on the other side. That, in my mind, is probably the best secondary for the Oregon Ducks. But I'll say this, there's a reason I'm just talking into a microphone and Dan Lanning getting paid the big bucks. I truly believe that Dan Lanning, with all this talent in the secondary, whatever choice that he makes in terms of personnel and how you're going to use them, you're going to be in a good spot in the back end for this Oregon Ducks defense. That's how I see it shaking out. Again, would love to hear from you guys. A couple questions I want to ask you guys. How does that secondary shake out for y'all? And then number 2, how are we thinking the wide receiver room shakes out after Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Jurion Dickey, a couple other names that I wanted to include. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I think we're going to do a deep dive into Kobe Savage later on this week. So again, if y'all enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.